Katie Pavlich, what is Fast and Furious? Why does it justify a book? What is the essence of this story from your vantage point?
Well, essentially, we'll start with what the Justice Department and this administration claimed Fast and Furious is going to be, and then we can get into what actually happened. The Justice Department, in partnership with other agencies and departments like Homeland Security, claimed that their goal was to send and allow straw purchasers, who are people who come in.
Straw purchasers of?
I'll explain it.
Okay.
Straw purchasers are people who come into gun shops and buy guns for other people, transfer them to criminals, transfer them to criminal organizations. So what this program, Fast and Furious, they claimed was going to do was allow these straw purchasers to come into gun shops in Arizona, purchase these guns. They were going to surveil these straw purchasers in the transfers to cartel members and trace these guns into this extensive Mexican cartel network in an effort to take down what they called the big fish in the cartel, to kind of take down the cartel network. Problem is that 2 of these guns actually ended up at the murder scene of one of our Border Patrol agents, Border Patrol Agent Brian Terry, on December 15th, 2010. And it turns out that actually they weren't tracking these guns. They sent 2,500 guns into Mexico. Out of 2,500 of them, they put 2 GPS recording devices on them. Now, that doesn't sound like a very serious tracing program to me.
And did this program, Fast and Furious, have any antecedents in the Bush administration? Because that's something that comes up a lot. Well, this was authorized by the Bush administration. Was it the same program? Did it have the same intent? What are the similarities and differences?
So we have heard that argument that this started under the Bush administration. Now, there's an umbrella program called Project Gunrunner that was started under the Bush administration that was using straw purchasers and arresting them, actually stopping guys from buying guns and transferring them into Mexico. They ran a program called Operation Wide Receiver under the Bush administration, where they were working with the Mexican government, surveilling these guys and these cartel members, transferring guns into Mexico. And they were saying, once these guns get to the border, Mexico, you pick up the tab and continue from there. Problem is that the Mexican government dropped the ball, and the program was immediately shut down. Now, under Fast and Furious, completely different story. The Mexican government wasn't informed about the program, and instead of a few hundred guns, we're talking about thousands of guns with no Mexican government involvement to stop them, not to mention trying to actually trace them and keep them away and out of the hands and arrest the people before they were taken to violent crime scenes and used in murders.
Let's help our audience understand the geography of this program and the results or lack of results. This started in Arizona?
Yes.
Why Arizona, and what kind of firearms are we talking about?
Well, Arizona is a border state, and this administration, going back to the beginning, made stopping gun trafficking into Mexico a top priority. Well, if you're going to stop gun trafficking into Mexico, of course you choose a border state to stop it. This administration was claiming that these guns that the cartels were using were coming from mom and pop stores in America and going into Mexico. Now, that actually isn't the case. The State Department's own cables show that these cartels aren't getting their guns from the United States. They're getting them from cheaper sources like China and Central America. So you go into, well, why was Arizona chosen? It's on the border. It's a pro-Second Amendment state, so it's easy to blame cartel violence on the gun dealers there. And you look at the politics and the people behind the program, which we can get into a little later. Arizona was chosen for political reasons, not necessarily to actually stop gun trafficking into Mexico.
Did the fact that the Homeland Security Secretary, Janet Napolitano, having been a previous governor of Arizona, have any role in this from your point of view?
Absolutely. And the person I think who had a very big role was actually her former staffer. His name is former U.S. Attorney for Arizona, Dennis Burke. Now, he served as Janet Napolitano's staffer when she was the Attorney General of Arizona and served as her chief of staff while she was governor of Arizona, and followed her into the Obama administration as her senior Homeland Security advisor before President Obama appointed him to U.S. Attorney in Arizona. Now, he was the guy who oversaw trafficking of guns into Mexico from the ground level on the DOJ side, and the memos prove that he was in full approval of these guys coming into gun shops, buying guns, and sending them back to Mexico.
Would this be a story? Would there be a book, if not for the tragedy that befell the Terry family?
Unfortunately, probably not. This was something that was swept under the rug and kept from not only the American people, but the Mexican people as well. There are hundreds of faceless, innocent Mexican citizens who have been murdered as a result of this. But the only thing that we knew outside of the government program was that guns from American gun dealers were going into Mexico and causing all these problems with the cartel, when really the government was sanctioning these sales and sending them into Mexico. And so we wouldn't have known about this if we hadn't have found out about Brian Terry's murder. But more importantly, if we hadn't heard from whistleblowers and on online sites that were talking about what ATF was doing, and whistleblowers coming forward and saying, this is what we've been doing. Most of us have been complaining about this to our superiors since the beginning, yet they wanted to move forward with it.
What do you know, and what can you tell our audience about the circumstances of Brian Terry's death?
Well, we don't know much. The case file for him has been sealed, and the reason why the judge sealed the case file has also been sealed. But what we do know is...
Wait a minute, I just want to go over that again. So the file was sealed, and then there is a explanatory reason from a federal judge?
Federal judge out of San Diego.
But that has also been sealed?
That has also been sealed. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about the secrecy surrounding Brian Terry's murder right up front. Now, that night, they claim that there were 2 guns at the scene. You look at the documentation, it says at least 2 guns were left at the scene that were connected to Operation Fast
and where did this shooting occur?
In Arizona, which in about 11 miles north of the border, in a notoriously dangerous drug cartel area known as Pet Canyon. And it's a very remote part of the country. You can really only get there by helicopter and by foot. And it's one of those areas where it's very difficult to combat drug trafficking, but that's where the cartels work. And if you look at the maps and the data, that's one of the hottest areas in the country for cartel activity.
So what was Brian Terry doing there? What was his capacity? Who was he working for? And based on what little we know, what can you reconstruct of that evening?
So Brian Terry was actually a Marine and a police officer before he joined Border Patrol, and he tried out for an elite Border Patrol team known as BORTAC, which is kind of like the Marines or the Navy SEALs of Border Patrol. They do special operations. They deal with the worst of the worst in terms of drug cartels coming up with weapons rather than people simply moving up north and across the border. So that night, what they were doing is just their regular runs. They knew that Pet Canyon was a hot area. They had been watching these RIP crews, or these guys who come in and steal guns or steal drugs from other crews in order to make a quick buck, because they're not the ones bringing it across. They just steal it and go sell it. It's easy for them that way. So they were just simply doing their job. And so they come over into this canyon and they see this crew of men who were very heavily armed, and they fired beanbag rounds at them. And unfortunately...
Is that standard operating procedure?
That is standard operating procedure according to Homeland Security's policy. And when you're dealing with guys who, as we saw about 3 weeks ago, who are willing to leave headless, feetless, handless bodies on the side of the road, I don't think that shooting beanbags at them you would expect a friendly fire response, and that's exactly what happened. They returned fire with AK-47s, which were given to them, or at least 2 of them were given to them by the U.S. government, allowed to go into their hands deliberately by the U.S. government.
Through these straw purchases that were supposedly being surveilled.
Right, exactly. And then Brian Terry was hit and he was killed. And they're lucky that not more Border Patrol agents were killed that night.
Has the family seen his body?
They have, yes. He went home the next day. So they had his funeral and they did see his body.
Okay. How would you describe the level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction of the Terry family and what they've been told and what they haven't been told?
They're very unsatisfied, and they absolutely should be. His mother has had to find out most of the information about her son's death through the very few media outlets that are actually covering this. Former U.S. Attorney Dennis Burke, who I mentioned earlier, flew to Michigan to visit the family and gave them the runaround, didn't give them any details. They've been denied, Dennis Burke, once again, denied them victim status in this case, where they would have a claim against the government for hurting them in the sense that they allowed the sanctioning of sales that got their son killed. And so they really have no answers. Josephine Terry is her name. That's Brian Terry's mother. After Eric Holder testified in February, she posted
Attorney General, yes.
Yes, she posted on Facebook that, I don't understand why you never say my son's name, you never mention him, and you don't have the, you're arrogant, you don't have the nerve to actually mention why this happened. And speaking of the Attorney General, there was a hearing back in October where Texas Senator John Cornyn asked Eric Holder, have you